My name is Mallory, and I'm 29 years old. I'll never forget the moment my entire world shattered over Sunday dinner. I was sitting at my parents' dining table in Portland, passing the mashed potatoes, when my mother looked at me with that expression I knew too well, the one that said she was about to ask something important. She cleared her throat and said those words that would change everything. Mallory, honey, we need to talk about the $250,000. What exactly did you do with it? I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth, my mind racing through every possible explanation for what she could mean. $250,000? What $250,000? I looked at my father, then at my brother Derek sitting across from me, and that's when I saw it. Derek had gone completely pale, his face drained of all color, and he dropped his fork with a clatter that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent room. Before we dive into this nightmare, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Have you ever had someone betray your trust? Hit that like button if you're ready for a story about family, betrayal, and the fight for justice. And please subscribe, because you won't believe how this unfolds. Trust me, what happened next will shock you. The confusion on my face must have been obvious because my mother, Patricia, leaned forward with concern creasing her forehead. Mallory, don't play games with us. Your grandmother Rose passed away 18 months ago, and she left you a very specific inheritance. My mind reeled. Grandma Rose had died, yes, and I'd been devastated, but no one had ever mentioned money to me. It assumed she'd left everything to be divided among her children, my parents included. Patricia continued, her voice taking on an edge of frustration. The will was very clear. She left you $250,000 in a trust fund. Your father was the trustee, and the money was supposed to be transferred to you when you turned 29. That was 8 months ago, Mallory. I looked at my father, Gordon, who was staring down at his plate, his jaw clenched. Dad, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He finally met my eyes, and I saw something there I couldn't quite identify. Disappointment? Anger? He said slowly. The money was transferred to an account in your name 8 months ago, exactly as the trust specified. We've been waiting for you to say something, to tell us your plans for it, but you've been silent, and now we've noticed some things. Mallory, your trip to Seattle last month, that new laptop you have, the way you've been spending. My heart started pounding. This made no sense. I'd never received any money. The Seattle trip had been a work conference that my company partially reimbursed. The laptop I'd saved for over 6 months to purchase, setting aside $100 from each paycheck. I never got any money, I said firmly, looking around the table at each of them. I don't know what account you're talking about, but I never opened any account, and I certainly never received $250,000. My mother made a sound of disbelief. Mallory, please, we're not accusing you of anything terrible. We just want to know what you did with the money. If you made some poor choices, we can help you, but you need to be honest with us. The condescension in her voice made my blood boil. They thought I was lying. They thought I'd blown through $250,000 and was now pretending it never existed. Derek, who had been silent this entire time, finally spoke up, but his voice was strained. Maybe there's been some kind of mistake with the bank, he offered weakly. I latched onto that. Yes, exactly. There must be a mistake. Dad, I need to see the account information, the statements, everything. Because I promise you, I never received this money. Gordon's face hardened. You're saying your mother and I are lying? That we imagined transferring $250,000? The accusation stung. No, I'm saying something is very wrong here, and we need to figure out what. Patricia shook her head, her disappointment palpable. Derek was there when the will was read. He knows about the money too. Gordon, show her the summary you printed. My father reluctantly pulled out a folder from the sideboard behind him. He slid a paper across the table to me. I scanned it quickly, my hands trembling. There it was in black and white. An account at Pacific Northwest Bank, opened 8 months ago in my name and social security number, with an initial deposit of $250,000 from Gordon's trust account. And over the following 6 months, the account had been systematically drained through ATM withdrawals and transfers until the balance read 0. This isn't me, I said desperately. I never opened this account. Someone has stolen my identity. This is fraud. But even as I said it, I could see they didn't believe me. Patricia's eyes were full of hurt and confusion. Mallory, we're your parents. We love you, but we need you to be truthful with us. If you spent the money on something you're ashamed of, we can work through it together. But this denial is just making things worse. Gordon added. You have 1 week to come up with an explanation. We expect you to come clean about where the money went. This conversation is over for tonight. I stood up from the table, my appetite completely gone, my mind spinning. As I gathered my purse and coat, I glanced at Derek one more time. He still wouldn't meet my eyes, and there was sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature in the house. Something about his reaction nagged at me. Why had he turned so pale when the subject first came up? Why was he so quiet now? Driving home through the rainy Portland streets, I replayed every detail of the evening. Derek's new truck that Head bought 6 months ago, the one Head claimed came from a work bonus. His wife Simona's expensive new jewelry that Shed said was an inheritance from her grandmother. The fact that they'd recently paid off their mortgage early, which Derek had attributed to some successful investments, the timing of all of it aligned perfectly with when this mysterious account had been drained. My brother had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, but could he really have done something this terrible? Could he have stolen from me? I barely slept that night, tossing and turning as scenarios ran through my mind. By the time dawn broke, I'd made my decision. I called in sick to work at the graphic design firm, where I'd been employed for the past 5 years. And the moment the bank opened at 9, I was standing outside Pacific Northwest Bank's downtown branch. The manager, a woman named Helena, listened to my story with increasing concern. She pulled up the account information and confirmed everything my father had shown me. The account had indeed been opened in my name with all the correct personal information, including my social security number and date of birth. Can I see the signature card from when the account was opened? I asked. Helena hesitated but then pulled up the digital copy. The signature looked like mine, but I could tell it had been forged. The loops were slightly different, the pressure uneven. This isn't my signature, I told her firmly. I need to see all the transaction records, especially any ATM withdrawals, and I need to know if there's security footage. Helena's expression grew more serious. Miss Fletcher, if what you're saying is true, this is identity theft and fraud. You'll need to file a report with our fraud department. Over the next hour, Helena and I went through every transaction. The pattern was clear and methodical. Small withdrawals at first, 500 here, 1,000 there, as if someone was testing to see if anyone would notice. Then the amounts grew larger. 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. The ATM withdrawals were particularly revealing because the bank system logged which ATMs were used. Most of them were in the neighborhood where Derek lived and worked. Helena pulled up the security footage from several of the ATM transactions, and my heart sank even as my suspicions were confirmed. There, clear as day on the grainy video, was my brother Derek. He was wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, clearly trying to be discreet, but I'd know him anywhere. He was using my ATM card, the one that I'd never even known existed, to drain my inheritance. I left the bank with copies of everything: the forged signature, the transaction records, the ATM footage. Helena assured me that the fraud department would be investigating and that the police would likely need to be involved. My hands shook as I drove to Derek's automotive repair shop on the east side of town. He owned the place with a partner, and I knew he'd be there on a Monday morning. The shop smelled of oil and metal, familiar scents from when we were kids and Dad used to take Derek to work on cars together. Derek was in his office, a small glass-enclosed space overlooking the garage floor. When he saw me walk in, his face went through a series of expressions: surprise, fear, and then a forced smile. Hey Mel, what brings you by? His casual tone felt like sandpaper on my raw nerves. I closed the door behind me and placed my folder of evidence on his desk. We need to talk about the $250,000 you stole from me. The color drained from his face again, just like it had at dinner. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, but his eyes were already scanning the papers I'd laid out, seeing the ATM photos of himself. Derek, I have video of you withdrawing my money. I have the forged documents. The bank is already investigating. You can either tell me the truth right now, or you can explain it to the police. My voice was steady, but inside I was breaking. This was my big brother, the one who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd scared away my high school bullies. How could he have done this to me? He crumbled then, his shoulders sagging as he sat down heavily in his desk chair. I was desperate, Mallory. The business was failing. We were underwater on the mortgage, Simona's medical bills from her surgery last year, the kids' expenses. I knew about the inheritance from when the will was read. I knew Dad's passwords because Head had me help him with some computer stuff. I thought I could just borrow some of it, just to get through the rough patch, and then I'd pay it back before you even knew. But things kept getting worse. and I kept needing more. And then it was all gone. The confession hung in the air between us. Part of me had wanted to be wrong, had wanted there to be some other explanation, but hearing him admit it made it real in a way that hurt worse than it imagined. You forged my signature. You stole my identity. You took the money my grandmother left specifically for me, Derek. How could you think that was okay? But then something shifted in his expression. The remorse hardened into something defensive, almost aggressive. You know what, Mallory? Maybe you should think about this from my perspective. I have a family to support. I have 3 kids who need food and clothes and a roof over their heads. What do you have? You're single? You live alone in that apartment? You have no responsibilities. That money would have just sat in your account while I'm drowning. And let's not forget that I helped you through college. Remember that $500 I gave you sophomore year when you were short on rent? Where's my payback for that? I stared at him in disbelief. You're actually trying to justify this? You're trying to make me the bad guy because I'm not married with kids? And you loaned me $500 once, almost 10 years ago. So that somehow entitles you to $250,000 of my inheritance. My voice was rising now, anger flooding through the hurt. Derek stood up, his own anger matching mine. Family helps family, Mallory. That's what we do. That money should have been split among all of us anyway. Why did Grandma Rose leave it all to you? Because you were her favorite? That's not fair to the rest of us. His entitlement was breathtaking. So you decided to take what you thought you deserved, regardless of what Grandma Rose actually wanted, or what was legally mine. He moved around the desk toward me, and there was something almost threatening in his posture. You need to think very carefully about what you're going to do here, Mallory. If you go to the police, if you make this public, it will destroy our family. Mom and Dad will be devastated. My kids will lose their father. Simone will lose everything. Is that what you want? Do you want to be responsible for ruining all of their lives over money? The manipulation was so blatant it almost made me laugh. I'm not the one who ruined anything, Derek. You did that when you decided to commit fraud. You did that when you stole from your own sister. He shook his head, a cruel smile playing at his lips. If you go to the police, I'll tell Mom and Dad that you're lying about all of this. I'll tell them you gave me permission to access the account, that we were supposed to be investing the money together, and now you're backing out because you want all the profits. They'll believe me, Mallory. They've always believed me. The truth of that statement hit me hard. He was right. Our parents had always favored him, had always taken his word over mine. Growing up, I'd been the difficult child, the artistic one who didn't fit their expectations, while Derek had been the star athlete, the one who gave them grandchildren, the successful business owner. I have evidence, I said quietly. Video evidence. Bank records. It doesn't matter what you tell them. Derek stepped closer, and his voice dropped to something almost menacing. You have no idea what you're starting here, Mallory. You really don't. But if you want to go to war with your own family, if you want to tear apart everything we've built, then go ahead. Just know that I won't go down alone. The threat was clear, and it sent a chill down my spine. But I wasn't going to back down. Not from this. Not when Head stolen my future, and then tried to make me feel guilty for demanding justice. I went to my parents' house that evening with my folder of evidence, determined to make them see the truth. But when I walked through the door, I immediately knew something was wrong. Patricia's face was cold, and Gordon wouldn't even look at me. Derek's car was in the driveway. Had beaten me here. Mom, Dad, I have evidence that Derek stole my inheritance. I started, but Patricia held up her hand to stop me. Derek has already been here, Mallory. He told us everything. My heart leapt for a moment. Had confessed to them. But then Patricia continued, and my hope died. He told us about your business partnership, about how you two were going to invest the money together and split the profits. He told us how you're now trying to cut him out and keep everything for yourself. He even showed us text messages where you agreed to the arrangement. What? No, that's not true. Hes lying. I pulled out my evidence, spreading the papers on their coffee table. Look, this is him on the ATM cameras. This is the forged signature. I never agreed to any partnership, but Gordon just shook his head, his disappointment evident. Mallory, Derek showed us those text messages. They're from your phone number. He has proof of your agreement. I felt like I was in a nightmare. He faked those messages somehow. Dad, please, look at this evidence. The bank's fraud department is already investigating, but Patricia's voice was sharp when she responded. Derek has always been responsible. As a business owner, A father, a husband. You've always been the flighty one, Mallory. You went to art school instead of getting a practical degree. You're still unmarried at 29. You live alone and spend your time on frivolous hobbies. Derek has a family to think about. Why would he risk everything to steal from you? The words cut deeper than any knife could have. This was what they really thought of me. All my accomplishments, my successful career as a graphic designer, my independence, my carefully built life, none of it mattered to them. I wasn't Derek with his perfect family portrait, Patricia went on, each word landing like a blow. At least Derek gave us grandchildren. What have you done? You're so focused on yourself, on your career, on your freedom, that you can't even think about family. And now you're trying to destroy your brother out of jealousy. Gordon finally spoke, and his words were just as devastating. Derek has 3 children to support. Mallory, you just have yourself. Maybe Grandma Rose's will wasn't as fair as it should have been. Maybe Derek does deserve some of that money, has been struggling, and you've been doing fine on your own. I looked between my parents in disbelief. They were actually siding with Derek. They actually believed that his theft was somehow justified. I'm going to the police, I said quietly. I'm pressing charges for fraud and identity theft, Patricia gasped. You would do that to your own brother? You would send him to prison and leave his children without a father. Gordon stood up, his face red with anger. If you do that, Mallory, you are no longer welcome in this family. We will not stand by and watch you destroy Derek's life out of spite and greed. I left their house feeling like I'd been physically beaten. But the nightmare was only beginning. Within 24 hours, my phone started ringing. Derek's wife Simone called, screaming at me, calling me every vile name she could think of. You're destroying my children's future. How dare you try to send their father to prison? What kind of monster are you? When I tried to explain, she just screamed louder. Derek told me everything about your scheme to steal the business profits. You're a liar and a manipulator. Then my Uncle Ralph, Patricia's brother, called to mediate. But it quickly became clear he was on Derek's side too. Mallory, honey, I know you're upset, but you need to be the bigger person here. Derek made a mistake, sure, but family forgives family. You don't want to be the one who tears this family apart, do you? Think about the children. Think about your parents. I tried to tell him that Derek hadn't made a mistake, had committed a crime, but Ralph just sighed. Money changes people, Mallory. I never thought you'd be the type to choose money over family. My Aunt Darlene, Gordon's sister, was even worse. She started calling other family members, spreading Derek's version of the story. At a family gathering that weekend that I didn't attend, she made sure everyone knew that I was trying to steal from Derek and send him to prison. My cousins started avoiding my calls. The few who did answer were cold and distant, clearly believing Derek's lies. Then the social media campaign started. Derek posted a vague status about family betrayal and how money can corrupt even those you love most. Simone shared articles about sibling jealousy and greed. Their friends, who didn't know the whole story, offered sympathy and support. Some of them even posted their own stories about being betrayed by greedy relatives. I was being painted as the villain in a story where I was actually the victim. Even worse, the church community where my parents had been active members for 30 years heard Derek's version. These were people who'd known me since I was a child, who'd watched me grow up, and they were all taking Derek's side. The pastor called my mother to offer support during this difficult time with Mallory. Women from the congregation brought casseroles to Derek and Simone's house. Prayer chains were started asking God to soften Mallory's heart and help her see reason. I found myself completely isolated. Friends who were also friends with family members started pulling away, not wanting to get involved in family drama. My own grandmothers, friends, elderly women who'd loved Grandma Rose, were calling my mother to express their shock at my behavior. The isolation was suffocating. I'd gone from having a large, supportive extended family to being completely alone, all because I'd dared to demand justice for a crime committed against me. The loneliness was crushing, but what hurt most was the realization that my family had never really known me at all. They'd already decided who I was in their minds, the flighty artistic one, the selfish single woman, and no amount of evidence was going to change that perception. Derek, on the other hand, was the golden child who could do no wrong, even when caught red-handed committing fraud. Despite everything, I refused to give up. I found a lawyer named Fiona Walsh who specialized in family fraud cases. Fiona was in her mid-50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, with short gray hair and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. She reviewed all my evidence over the course of 2 hours in her office downtown, occasionally making notes and asking pointed questions. When she finally looked up, she said, "You have an airtight case, Mallory. The video evidence alone is damning, and the forged signature, the bank records, all of it points to clear fraud and identity theft. But I need you to understand something before we proceed." She leaned forward, her expression serious. Family fraud cases are different from other cases. They're emotionally devastating in ways that other crimes aren't. The defendant's lawyer will use every emotional manipulation tactic in the book. They'll talk about the children, the hardship, the family bonds. They'll try to make you look like the villain. Judges and juries sometimes go easier on family members than they would on strangers who committed the same crime. This is going to be a long, painful process, and it will likely cost you relationships that can never be repaired. Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed? I thought about the $250,000 my grandmother had worked her whole life to save, money Shed wanted me to have for my future. I thought about Derek's smug face when Head tried to manipulate me into silence. I thought about my parents' dismissal of my pain and their automatic assumption that Derek was the one telling the truth. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "This isn't just about the money anymore. It's about what's right. It's about not letting him get away with this." Fiona nodded approvingly. "Good. Then let's build our case." We filed a formal complaint with the police department that afternoon. Within a week, I received a letter from Derek's attorney, a man named Bradford Hayes. Fiona had warned me about Hayes. He was expensive, which raised the question of where Derek was getting the money to pay him, and he had a reputation for being ruthless and willing to bend ethical rules. The letter was full of legal threats and intimidation tactics. Hayes claimed I was harassing Derek, that I was making false accusations, and that if I didn't cease and desist immediately, they would file a countersuit for defamation and emotional distress. Fiona read the letter and laughed. "This is textbook intimidation, Hayes trying to scare you into backing down. It won't work in court, but it works on a lot of victims who don't have good representation. Ignore it." But as Fiona dug deeper into the case, she uncovered something that made my blood run cold. "Mallory, I've been looking at the bank records more carefully, and I think Derek didn't act alone." She showed me a series of transactions I hadn't noticed before. "Look at this. Your father Gordon received a deposit of $50,000 from Derek 6 months ago. The notation says loan repayment, but I did some checking. There's no record of Gordon ever loaning Derek money." My stomach dropped. "You think my father was in on it?" Fiona pulled up more records on her laptop. "I think we need to look at Gordon's finances more carefully. If he was complicit, it would explain why he delayed the transfer from the trust, and why he's so adamant about defending Derek now." Over the next few days, Fiona's investigator uncovered the ugly truth. Gordon had his own financial problems that had hidden from Patricia. He had gambling debts, bad investments in penny stocks, credit card balances had been struggling to pay. The $50,000 from Derek had helped him cover some of these debts. But it got worse. The conspiracy extended beyond just Derek and Gordon. Derek's business partner, a man named Clayton, had helped create the fake account documents. Clayton had connections at Pacific Northwest Bank from his previous job there, and had facilitated the fraud by vouching for the forged signature. In exchange, Derek had paid off $70,000 of Clayton's debts. The money trail showed even more beneficiaries of my stolen inheritance. $30,000 had gone to Simone's sister Bethany to repay a loan that Derek and Simone owed her. $20,000 had mysteriously appeared in Patricia's credit card account, paying off balances Shed accumulated. Patricia might not have known where the money came from, but Shed certainly benefited from it. When all was tallied up, only about $80,000 had actually gone to Derek's mortgage and business expenses. The rest had been distributed among family and friends, all of them now complicit in the theft whether they knew it or not. "This wasn't a desperate man making one bad decision," Fiona said grimly. "This was a premeditated conspiracy involving multiple people to defraud you of your inheritance. That actually works in our favor legally, because it shows intent and planning, but it also means you're up against more than just Derek." I felt sick. My own father had helped steal from me. People I'd known my whole life had profited from my loss. The family Thanksgiving gathering was scheduled for 3 weeks away. Already, I was getting pressure from various relatives to make peace with Derek before the holiday, to stop this madness, and remember what's really important: family. The irony of them lecturing me about family while defending the people woad stolen from me wasn't lost on me. But I knew that Thanksgiving would be a reckoning. It would be the first time the whole family would be together since this all came to light. and I was going to be ready. Fiona advised me that we needed more evidence before filing formal criminal charges, specifically recorded confessions or additional documentation that would make the case absolutely bulletproof. Defense attorneys are good at creating reasonable doubt, she explained. We need Derek on record admitting what he did. We need witnesses to his actions. That's when I got an unexpected phone call from a woman named Iris, who worked at Derek's automotive shop. Iris had been Derek's employee for 5 years, handling the books and customer service. She was a soft-spoken woman in her 40s with 2 kids of her own, and she told me over coffee that she'd been wrestling with her conscience for months. I saw him making large deposits to the business account that didn't match our revenue. When I asked about it, he got defensive and told me it was from a personal settlement he'd received. But the timing matched up with when you said the inheritance was being taken. I kept copies of the deposit slips because something felt wrong. And when I heard about what was happening with your family, I couldn't stay silent anymore. The deposit slips Iris provided showed clear evidence of Derek funneling money from my inheritance account into his business. The dates matched perfectly with the withdrawal records I had from the bank. Iris also told me about conversations she'd overheard between Derek and Clayton, his business partner, where they'd discussed keeping the story straight and making sure Mallory can't prove anything. She was willing to testify and provide documents, even though it meant likely losing her job. With Iris' help, we devised a plan. I would attend Thanksgiving dinner with a recording device. In Oregon, one-party consent laws meant I could legally record conversations without informing the other parties. I would confront Derek in front of the entire family, present my evidence, and let the truth come out in a way that couldn't be denied or twisted. It was risky because it meant exposing myself to more family hostility, but it also meant there would be witnesses to whatever Derek said, and I'd have everything on record. But the week before Thanksgiving, things took a dark turn. I came home from work one evening to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart pounding, I pushed it open carefully and immediately saw that the place had been ransacked. But it wasn't a typical burglary. My television was still there, my jewelry box untouched. What was missing was my laptop, which contained all my organized case files and evidence, and my backup external hard drive, which I'd stupidly kept in the same desk drawer. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were looking for. I called the police, filed a report, but I knew in my gut who was responsible. Derek, or someone working for him, had broken in to destroy my evidence. Fortunately, Fiona had copies of everything, and the bank had the original records, but it was still a violation that left me shaking. The police said they'd investigate, but break-ins were common and rarely solved. I knew I'd never get justice for this particular crime. Then the harassment escalated. Anonymous letters started arriving at my workplace, addressed to my boss Eugene. The letters claimed I was emotionally unstable, that I was stealing from my family and lying about it, that I was a liability to the company. Eugene called me into his office, clearly uncomfortable. He was a fair man in his 60s, who'd always been supportive of my work, but even he looked concerned. Mallory, I want you to know I don't believe these letters, but I have to ask. Is there something going on that I should know about? I explained the situation as briefly as I could, showing him some of the evidence I kept in my work files. He was sympathetic but worried. I support you completely, but if this drama starts affecting the company or our clients, we may need to discuss options. It was a polite warning that my job could be at risk if things got worse. My professional reputation was now under attack along with everything else. The phone harassment started next. Blocked numbers would call at all hours, sometimes heavy breathing, sometimes just silence, sometimes whispered threats. Drop this or you'll regret it. You're tearing apart your family. Some things are better left alone. I changed my number twice, but somehow they always got the new one. Then my car became a target. I came out one morning to find deep scratches keyed along both sides. The word liar was carved into the driver's door. A week later, all 4 tires were slashed in my apartment parking lot. The property manager installed cameras after that, but the damage was done. Each incident cost me money I couldn't really spare, and more importantly, it made me feel unsafe in my own neighborhood. I broke down crying in Fiona's office one afternoon, overwhelmed by the constant attacks. Is the money worth this? I asked her, through my tears. Maybe I should just let it go, walk away, cut ties with all of them and move on with my life. Fiona handed me a tissue and waited for me to compose myself before responding. Mallory, I'm going to tell you something I tell all my clients in cases like this. This stopped being about money the moment Derek refused to admit what he did, and instead chose to attack you. This is about whether you're going to let bullies win. This is about whether fraud and theft should go unpunished just because the criminal is related to you. And most importantly, this is about the next person Derek will victimize if he learns he can get away with this. Her words steadied me. She was right. If Derek got away with stealing from me, who would he target next? One of his kids when they got older? Another relative? A business partner? I couldn't let that happen. Okay, I said, wiping my eyes. We move forward. We don't back down. That's when my cousin Lila reached out. Lila was 31, the daughter of my mother's sister, and we'd been close as children, but had drifted apart as adults. She called me out of the blue and asked to meet for coffee. When we sat down, she looked nervous but determined. Mallory, I need you to know I never believed Derek's story. It never made sense, and I've been doing some quiet digging in the family, and I found out some things you need to know. Lila pulled out a notebook where she'd been documenting Derek's financial history with the family. Derek borrowed $5,000 from our grandparents 7 years ago, said it was for the business, never paid it back. He borrowed $10,000 from Aunt Darlene 4 years ago for Simone's medical bills, never paid it back. He borrowed $8,000 from Uncle Ralph 2 years ago for the kids' school expenses, never paid it back. There's a pattern here, Mallory. He takes money from family, makes promises to repay, and then when they ask about it, he makes them feel guilty for asking. He manipulates people into thinking they're being selfish for wanting their money back. This information was gold. It established a pattern of behavior that would be crucial in court. Lila agreed to testify if needed, even though it would cost her relationships with other family members. I have kids, she told me. I need them to grow up knowing that integrity matters, that you don't let people get away with doing wrong just because you're related to them. I'm with you, Mallory. Whatever you need. Having Lila on my side made the isolation a little more bearable. I wasn't completely alone anymore. Thanksgiving was now just days away, and I was ready for the confrontation that would either vindicate me or destroy what little family connection I had left. Thanksgiving Day arrived cold and gray, typical November weather in Portland. I drove to my parents' house with my stomach in knots, the small recording device hidden in my jacket pocket already running. The house was full when I arrived. At least 30 people crowded into the living room and dining room. Extended family, Derek's kids, Simone's parents, even some family friends. Everyone went quiet when I walked in. Derek was standing by the fireplace, looking confident and comfortable. When he saw me, he gave me a smug little smile that made my blood boil. Simone was at his side, her face hard and cold when she looked at me. Patricia rushed over, trying to usher me toward the kitchen. Mallory, I'm so glad you came. Let's not talk about any unpleasantness today. This is a day for family and gratitude. I nodded, but didn't promise anything. Dinner was tense. I sat at the far end of the table from Derek, feeling the weight of everyone's judgment. Simone made pointed comments about people who tear families apart over greed. Derek's mother-in-law talked loudly about the importance of forgiveness in families. Gordon drank heavily, already on his third scotch before Wed even finished the turkey. Patricia kept trying to keep the conversation light, asking about everyone's holiday plans, and pointedly avoiding anything controversial. After dinner, as people moved to the living room for dessert, I stood up. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Before we have dessert, I have something I need to say to everyone here. Patricia's face went pale. Mallory, please, not today. But I pressed on. No, Mom. This family needs to hear the truth. I'm tired of the lies and the manipulation. Derek moved toward me, trying to physically steer me away. Mallory, you're making a scene. This isn't the time or place. I shook off his hand. There's never going to be a good time or place for this, Derek. So everyone is going to hear it right now. I pulled out my laptop, which I'd brought in from the car, and set it up on the coffee table. I want to show you all something. I started with the bank statements, projecting them on the TV screen. 8 months ago, an account was opened in my name, without my knowledge. $250,000, my inheritance from Grandma Rose, was deposited into this account. Over the following 6 months, that account was systematically drained through ATM withdrawals and transfers. I never opened this account. I never authorized these transactions. Someone stole my identity and my inheritance. There were murmurs through the room. Some people were clearly hearing this version for the first time. I pulled up the ATM footage next. This is security camera footage from the bank's ATMs. Here is the person making withdrawals from my account. The video played, showing Derek clear as day despite his attempts at disguise. The room went completely silent. Derek's face was red. That's out of context. Mallory and I had an agreement. She's manipulating the facts. I pulled up the next piece of evidence. Here are text messages that Derek claims show our agreement to be business partners. I had a forensic analyst look at these messages. They were created using a spoofing app. They never actually came from my phone. The metadata proves it. Simone jumped up, screaming. This is ridiculous. You're setting him up. You've always been jealous of Derek. You can't stand that he has a real family and you're alone. Her words stung, but I kept going. I pulled up the documents Iris had provided. These are deposit records from Derek's business account. The amounts and dates match perfectly with the withdrawals from my inheritance account. Derek was funneling stolen money into his business. Then I dropped the biggest bomb, and he didn't act alone. I looked at my father, who had gone very still, his drink frozen halfway to his mouth. Dad received $50,000 from Derek 6 months ago, labeled as loan repayment for a loan that never existed. Derek's business partner Clayton helped create the fake account documents. Simone's sister Bethany received $30,000 to pay off a debt. Even Mom's credit cards were paid off with $20,000 of stolen money, though I don't think she knew where it came from. Patricia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Gordon? What is she talking about? Gordon's face crumbled. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was the weight of the guilt. But he broke. I helped him, he said quietly. Derek came to me, said he was desperate, said the business was failing, and he'd lose everything. He knew about the inheritance, knew I was the trustee. He knew my passwords from when Id asked him to help me with computer problems. I thought we'd just borrow some temporarily, that we'd replace it before Mallory ever knew. But my gambling debts, the bad investments, I couldn't pay my share back. And then it snowballed. The room erupted. Patricia was crying, staring at Gordon like she'd never seen him before. You did this? You helped steal from our daughter. Derek's aunt was yelling at him, asking how he could do such a thing. Simona's father was demanding to know if the money that paid for their family vacation last summer was stolen money. Uncle Ralph tried to take control, standing up and raising his hands for quiet. Okay. This is clearly a very complicated situation. I'm sure we can work this out as a family. We can figure out a payment plan, a way to make this right without involving the authorities. But Aunt Darlene cut him off. Ralph, he committed fraud. He stole from his own sister. This isn't something you fix with a payment plan. Derek, seeing everything falling apart, went on the offensive. Fine. Yes, I took the money. But family. Blood should mean something. Mallory, if you really loved us, if you really cared about this family, you'd forgive this. You'd understand that I was desperate, that I had no choice. My children, your niece and nephews, are going to suffer if you press charges. Their father will go to prison. Is that what you want? Do you want to be the person who destroys 3 innocent children's lives? The emotional manipulation was exactly what Fiona had warned me about, and I could see it working on some people in the room. Some of the older relatives were nodding, clearly thinking that family should forgive anything. But then Derek's daughter Skylar spoke up. She was 15, old enough to understand what was happening. Dad, you stole from Aunt Mallory. You lied to everyone. How is that her fault? Derek turned on his own daughter. You don't understand the adult world, Skylar. Sometimes you have to do things you're not proud of to survive. But Skylar shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, Dad. You had choices. You chose to steal. You chose to lie. Don't blame Aunt Mallory for that. Lila stood up then, adding her voice to mine. Derek's been doing this for years. He borrowed money from Grandma and Grandpa, from Aunt Darlene, from Uncle Ralph, and never paid any of it back. This isn't a one-time desperate mistake. This is a pattern of using family and never facing consequences. The murmurs grew louder as people began to realize the scope of Derek's behavior. Iris, who Id brought as a witness, stood up and confirmed the business account deposits and the conversations Shed overheard between Derek and Clayton about covering up the fraud. With each piece of evidence, each testimony, Derek's support in the room crumbled. Even some of the people who'd been most firmly on his side were looking uncertain. Derek tried one last manipulation. Fine, I'm the villain. I'm the terrible person who stole money because I was trying to keep my family afloat. But Mallory, you have to decide what matters more to you. Money or family. Because if you keep going with this, if you press charges, our family will never be the same. You'll be the one who tore us apart. Is that the legacy you want? I looked around the room at all these people, some of whom had known me my entire life, some of whom had automatically assumed the worst about me, and I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Derek, you tore this family apart the moment you decided to forge my signature and steal my inheritance. You made it worse when you lied about it and tried to make me look like the villain. And you've been tearing at the fabric of this family for years with your manipulation and your refusal to take responsibility for your actions. I'm not destroying this family by demanding justice. You destroyed it by committing fraud. I looked at my parents, at Patricia's tear-stained face, and Gordon's shame. I loved this family. I wanted to be part of this family, but I'm not going to accept abuse and theft just to maintain an illusion of family unity. I deserve better than that. And honestly, all of you deserve better than what Derek has been doing to you for years. With that, I packed up my laptop, looked at Lila and Iris, and said, "Let's go." The three of us walked out of that house, leaving behind the chaos and the shouting and the years of dysfunction. The week after Thanksgiving, Fiona and I filed formal criminal charges against Derek, Gordon, and Clayton. The police took my evidence, the bank's fraud investigation report, the testimony from Iris and Lila, and the recording I'd made at Thanksgiving dinner. Derek was arrested on a Tuesday morning at his shop. Gordon was arrested at the house, in front of Patricia. Clayton was picked up at his apartment. All three were charged with identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Derek faced up to 10 years in prison. Gordon faced up to 5 years as an accessory. Clayton faced similar charges. Bradford Hayes, Derek's expensive lawyer, immediately started working on a plea deal. He called Fiona, trying to negotiate. "My client is willing to plead guilty to a lesser charge in exchange for probation and restitution." But Fiona, with my full support, pushed back hard. "Your client committed premeditated fraud against his own sister, involved multiple co-conspirators, and then harassed and intimidated the victim when she sought justice. We're not accepting any deal that doesn't include significant prison time." The media picked up the story. A local news station ran a segment, "Brother arrested for stealing $250,000 inheritance from sister." The story went viral in Portland, and then nationally. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion about our family drama. The coverage was deeply embarrassing for everyone involved, but especially for Patricia, who'd been a prominent member of her church and community for decades. Patricia's response to Gordon's arrest was swift and decisive. She filed for legal separation and moved out of the house, staying temporarily with Aunt Darlene. When I heard about it, part of me felt vindicated that she was finally seeing Gordon's true character, but another part of me ached for her. Whatever his faults, she'd been married to him for 35 years. She called me a week after the arrests, her voice small and broken. "Mallory, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have supported you. I chose Gordon and Derek over you, and I was wrong." Her apology was sincere, but it couldn't undo the damage. "Mom, I appreciate the apology, but you need to understand that you didn't just fail to believe me about the theft. You made judgments about my character, about my worth as a person, that showed me how you've really seen me all along. The flighty one, the irresponsible one, the one who couldn't possibly be as valuable as Derek because I'm not married with children." Patricia cried on the phone. I know I've been a terrible mother to you in so many ways. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I want to try to make this right." I told her honestly that I didn't know if our relationship could be repaired, but I was willing to try. We started meeting for coffee once a week, slowly attempting to rebuild something from the rubble of our relationship. It was awkward and painful, but it was something. Derek's family was in freefall. Simone, facing the reality of Derek's actions and the public shame, filed for divorce while he was out on bail. She came to my apartment one afternoon, unannounced, and when I opened the door, she looked exhausted and defeated. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I believed Derek's lies because I wanted to believe them. I didn't want to face that I'd married someone capable of this. I said terrible things to you, and I'm sorry." I accepted her apology, though our relationship would never be warm. She was a victim of Derek's lies too, but she'd also been vicious in her attacks on me. Some of Derek's kids reached out as well. Skylar wrote me a long letter, telling me how proud she was that I'd stood up for myself, how she'd learned from watching me that integrity matters more than keeping the peace. She wanted to maintain a relationship with me despite everything her father had done, and I agreed. Tucker and Paige were younger, 12 and 9, and I wasn't sure they fully understood what had happened, but I hoped that someday they would. At my workplace, Eugene called me in to apologize for the way Head questioned me when the anonymous letters arrived. Those letters were clearly part of a harassment campaign, and I should have seen that immediately. I'm sorry I made you feel like your job was at risk. He then offered me a promotion to senior designer, which came with a raise and more creative control over projects. Your work speaks for itself, Mallory. And honestly, the way you've handled this situation with such grace shows character that this company values. Some of our clients had heard about the case, and a few of them specifically requested to work with me because they admired my integrity. One woman, a small business owner, told me, I had a similar situation with my brother years ago. I backed down because everyone told me family was more important than money. Watching you fight for yourself gives me courage to finally address some situations I've been avoiding. The legal proceedings moved forward. Derek's assets were frozen. His house, his truck, all the equipment from the automotive shop. Clayton's assets were also frozen. Gordon's retirement account was garnished. Through the civil suit Fiona filed alongside the criminal case, we started recovering money. Derek's house was sold, and after paying off the remaining mortgage, it netted $90,000. Combined with funds recovered from Clayton and garnishments from Gordon's accounts, I eventually got back $242,000 of the original $250,000. I was still short $8,000, and I'd never see that money again. But at this point, it wasn't about getting every penny back. It was about the principle. It was about not letting Derek get away with what He'd done. During the asset investigation, something else came to light that shocked even me. Investigators discovered that Derek had been embezzling from his own business partner, Clayton. Clayton, it turned out, was as much a victim as an accomplice. Head helped Derek with the bank fraud because Derek had been secretly stealing from their joint business accounts and had leveraged that to manipulate Clayton into helping. But it went even deeper. Derek had been stealing from a youth sports league, where Head volunteered as a coach. Over 3 years, Head skimmed nearly $40,000 from fundraising accounts. Other victims started coming forward. A neighbor, Wad, lent Derek $15,000 for what Derek claimed was a medical emergency for one of the kids. Money that had actually gone to pay off gambling debts. A former coworker who'd invested $20,000 in what Derek said was a business opportunity, which turned out to be completely fabricated. When all the fraud was tallied up, Derek had stolen nearly $600,000 over 12 years from various people and organizations. He wasn't a desperate man who'd made one terrible mistake. He was a career con artist who'd been using his nice guy image and his family connections to prey on people's trust. The revelation was devastating but also vindicating. Every person who'd doubted me, who'd suggested I should just forgive and forget, now had to confront the reality of who Derek really was. The apologies started coming in. Uncle Ralph called, admitting He'd been wrong to pressure me to drop the case. Aunt Darlene sent a long email acknowledging that she'd spread Derek's lies without checking the facts first. Cousins who'd avoided me started reaching out, expressing their shock and their regret that they hadn't supported me. But the apologies, while appreciated, couldn't undo the damage. I'd learned who these people really were when the chips were down, and that knowledge changed our relationships forever. Some bridges could be repaired. Others were burned beyond salvaging, and I was starting to be okay with that. 6 months after I filed charges, Derek stood in front of a judge and pleaded guilty. His lawyer had finally convinced him that going to trial would result in a much harsher sentence, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. He pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. The judge sentenced him to 7 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5, if he showed good behavior and made restitution efforts. Gordon pleaded guilty as an accessory and received 18 months in prison with 5 years of probation. Clayton, who cooperated fully with prosecutors and whose own victimization by Derek was taken into account, received probation and community service. Standing in that courtroom when the sentences were handed down, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that justice had been served, sadness that it had come to this, grief for the family I'd thought I had but never really did. Derek didn't look at me during the sentencing. Simone and the kids were there, Skylar stone-faced, the younger two crying quietly, and my heart broke for them even as I knew I'd done the right thing. With the recovered funds, I had to decide what to do with $242,000. After everything I'd been through, the money felt different than it would have if I'd simply received my inheritance, as Grandma Rose had intended. I paid off my car, bought a modest 2-bedroom condo with no mortgage, and established a solid emergency fund. I donated $10,000 to a nonprofit organization that helped victims of financial fraud, particularly elder abuse and family fraud cases. The rest I invested conservatively, following the advice of a financial planner. The money provided security, but had learned that it couldn't provide happiness or peace. Those had to come from within, and from the relationships I chose to nurture. Patricia and I continued our weekly coffee meetings, slowly rebuilding trust. It wasn't the same relationship Wed had before, and it never would be. But it was becoming something more honest, even if it was more fragile. She admitted to me one afternoon that Shed always favored Derek, that Shed seen her own dreams in him, the star athlete, the family man, and had been disappointed that I'd chosen such a different path. "I wanted you to be more conventional," she confessed. "I wanted you to get married and have children and give me more grandchildren. I couldn't appreciate that you were building a good life in your own way. I'm sorry for that, Mallory. I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't enough just because you weren't what I'd expected." It was painful to hear but also freeing. Her favoritism wasn't about my actual worth or accomplishments. It was about her own unfulfilled expectations. That was her issue to work through, not mine. Gordon and I had a few supervised meetings after his release from prison. Had served his full 18 months and came out looking older and broken. He apologized, explained about the gambling addiction Had hidden for years, the shame that had driven him to make terrible choices. I listened, and part of me felt sorry for him, but I also knew that our relationship might never be fully restored. Trust, once shattered so completely, is almost impossible to rebuild entirely. We would likely remain cordial but distant for the rest of our lives. Derek wrote me letters from prison. The first few were angry and accusatory, blaming me for destroying his family, for taking away his children's father. Fiona advised me not to read them, and I didn't. Later, I heard from Patricia that his letters had changed, that Had started taking responsibility and expressing genuine remorse. Maybe he had changed. Maybe prison had given him the perspective Had lacked, but I wasn't ready to find out. I might never be ready, and I'd made peace with that. My cousin Lila and I grew close during this time. She became one of my best friends, someone I could trust implicitly. Iris, Derek's former employee, also became a friend. Shed lost her job when Derek's business collapsed, but Shed found a better position at a larger automotive company and was doing well. The three of us, along with a few other women who'd been victims of family fraud, formed an informal support group. We met monthly, shared our stories, and helped each other navigate the complex emotions that came with being betrayed by family. Through this group, I met a carpenter named Jasper. Had been brought by a friend of Lila's, having gone through his own situation where his father had forged his signature on a business loan. We started talking after one of the meetings, and I found myself drawn to his quiet strength and his understanding of what I'd been through. He asked me to coffee, and I said yes. Our relationship developed slowly, built on honesty and mutual respect. He knew my whole story, and he admired the courage it had taken to stand up for myself. Had made the same choice in his own situation, which is part of what drew us together. After a year of dating, Jasper proposed, and I said yes. We planned a small wedding for the following spring, inviting only the people who'd truly supported us through our respective ordeals. The guest list was small but meaningful. Lila, Iris, a few friends from work, Patricia if our relationship continued to heal, and Jasper's mother and siblings. It would be nothing like the big family wedding my mother had once dreamed of for me, but it would be authentic and surrounded by people who actually loved and valued me. My advocacy work grew beyond the support group. I was invited to speak at community events about financial fraud, particularly about family fraud, which often goes unreported because victims feel guilty or pressured to protect their abusers. I helped 3 other people recognize they were victims and gave them the courage to pursue justice. One woman, Margot, was 63 and had had her entire retirement stolen by her son. Watching me go through my case gave her the strength to press charges and begin rebuilding her life. "I thought I was alone," she told me. "I thought no one would understand why I'd send my own son to prison, but you showed me that justice isn't about revenge. It's about accountability and protecting future victims." This work gave me purpose beyond my own recovery. Grandma Rose's inheritance, or what was left of it, had become the seed money for a kind of advocacy I'd never imagined I'd do. I visited Grandma Rose's grave regularly, bringing flowers, and talking to her like she could hear me. "Thank you," I told her one sunny afternoon. "Thank you for the gift that revealed the truth. Without the inheritance, I might have gone my whole life not knowing who Derek really was. I might have been victimized in different ways later. You gave me clarity, Grandma. And that was worth more than any amount of money. I like to think Shed be proud of the woman I'd become. Not because of the money itself, but because I'd had the strength to fight for what was right, even when it cost me dearly. 2 years after that devastating Thanksgiving dinner, my life looked completely different. I was 31 now, preparing for my wedding to Jasper, running my own successful design consultancy, and living in a condo I owned, outright, with no debt hanging over my head. Derek was in his 2nd year of prison, and according to Patricia, who still visited him occasionally, had become involved in a rehabilitation program and claimed to be working on himself. Gordon had been released from prison and was living alone in a small apartment, attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings and working part-time at a hardware store. He and Patricia were officially divorced now, both of them trying to rebuild separate lives. Patricia and I had reached a place of careful peace. We had lunch every Sunday, and while our relationship wasn't what it had been before, it was more honest now. She'd done a lot of work in therapy, examining her favoritism and her role in enabling Derek's behavior for years. Shed admitted to me that Shed made excuses for him since he was a teenager, covering up his lies, bailing him out of trouble, always believing his version of events, because it was easier than confronting who he really was. I failed you both, she told me once. I failed Derek by never holding him accountable, and I failed you by not seeing your strength and integrity. Gordon and I had sporadic contact. We saw each other occasionally at family events, exchanged polite conversation, but there was a distance between us that I doubted would ever fully close. Forgiveness was a process, I'd learned, not a destination. Some days I felt I'd forgiven him, other days the betrayal felt fresh. Therapy had taught me that both reactions were valid, and that I didn't owe anyone a timeline for my healing. Derek's children had processed everything in their own ways. Skylar was 18 now, headed to college on a scholarship Shed earned through hard work and determination. She credited our situation with teaching her about integrity and the importance of standing up for what's right even when it's hard. We had lunch once a month, and I was proud of the strong young woman she was becoming. Tucker was 14 and Paige was 11, and while they maintained a relationship with their father through prison visits, they also understood that had done something very wrong. They were in therapy processing their complex feelings about it all. My career had flourished in unexpected ways. Starting my own consultancy had been scary, but my reputation for integrity and quality work attracted clients who valued those traits. I made a good living doing work I loved, with the freedom to choose projects that excited me creatively. Several of my clients had come to me specifically because they'd heard about my case and respected how I'd handled it. That validation meant more than any amount of money could. Jasper and I were building a life together based on honesty, respect, and shared values. He understood the importance of boundaries and the reality that some family relationships can't be salvaged. His own experience with family fraud meant he never pressured me to reconcile with people who'd hurt me, or to forgive on anyone's timeline but my own. Our relationship was healthy in ways I'd never experienced before, built on a foundation of trust and mutual support. The fraud victim support group I'd helped start had grown to help over 50 people in the Portland area. WED expanded to offer workshops on protecting yourself from financial fraud, recognizing manipulation tactics, and navigating the legal system. One woman I'd helped, Margot, had become a co-facilitator of the group. She was rebuilding her retirement at 63, after her son had stolen nearly $200,000 from her, and Shed told me more than once that my story had given her the courage to pursue justice. I was ready to just accept it, Shed said. Everyone told me I should forgive him, that he was my son, that prison would ruin his life. But you showed me that I deserved justice, that his choices had consequences, and that I wasn't responsible for protecting him from those consequences. I'd learned so many lessons through this nightmare that had become a strange kind of gift. I'd learned that family is about love and respect, not just blood relation. I'd learned that setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. It makes you sane. I'd learned that money reveals character rather than creating it. Derek's true character had always been there. The money just brought it into sharp focus. I'd learned that forgiveness is for my own peace, but trust must be earned, and some people will never earn it back no matter how much time passes. I'd learned that justice isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. Sending Derek to prison wasn't about punishing him out of spite. It was about ensuring he faced consequences for his actions and protecting future victims from his manipulation. Id learned that the people who believe you without proof are the ones who truly love you, and the people who doubt you despite proof don't. That lesson had been painful but clarifying. Finally, Id learned that sometimes you have to lose a family to gain yourself, and that exchange, as devastating as it feels in the moment, can be worth it. Standing in my condo one evening, I looked at the photos on my wall. There were pictures of Lila and me at a concert, Iris and her kids at a barbecue I'd hosted, Jasper and me hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, and even one recent photo of Patricia and me at our Sunday lunch, both of us smiling tentatively but genuinely. These were my people now, my chosen family, the ones who'd stood by me when it cost them something to do so. There was a framed photo of Grandma Rose too, taken when I was about 10 and she was teaching me to bake her famous apple pie. She was smiling at the camera, flour on her apron, and I felt like she'd known somehow that the money she left me would change my life, just not in the way anyone expected. Some days were still hard. Holidays could trigger memories of that awful Thanksgiving confrontation. Christmas gatherings were smaller and more carefully curated now. Mother's Day and Father's Day carried complicated emotions, but mostly, I felt free. Free from toxic family dynamics where I'd always been considered less than Derek. Free from the burden of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Free to build my life according to my own values and standards. Free to say no to people who demanded my compliance but offered no respect in return. That Thanksgiving dinner when Eid stood up in front of everyone and spoken my truth had cost me a family, but it had given me something infinitely more valuable. It had given me myself. It had given me the knowledge that I could stand alone if I had to, that I could fight for what was right even when everyone around me said I was wrong, that I could survive betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. Grandma Rose had left me more than money. She'd left me the gift of clarity, the catalyst that revealed the true nature of the people around me, and my own strength in the face of that revelation. As I closed my laptop after finishing a design project for a new client, Jasper called from the kitchen that dinner was almost ready. Skylar was coming over for the weekend to help me pick out wedding flowers and to tell me about her college plans. Life wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and honest was what Id needed all along. I didn't spend time wondering about that missing $8,000 anymore. Some things you have to let go of. What mattered was that Id fought for myself, that Id survived a nightmare that would have broken many people, and that Id built a new life from the ashes of the old one. If someone had told me 2 years ago, sitting at that Thanksgiving table in shock as my world imploded, that I'd end up here, stronger and more at peace than I'd ever been, I wouldn't have believed them. But here I was, proof that you can survive family betrayal, that you can choose integrity over keeping the peace, that you can walk away from toxic people even when they share your DNA, and that you can build something beautiful from the rubble. The final lesson, the one that took me the longest to learn, was this: I deserved better than what Derek, Gordon, and even Patricia in her own way had given me. I deserved respect, honesty, and genuine love. And I'd rather have a small circle of people who offered those things than a large family who offered only judgment and conditional acceptance. That Thanksgiving dinner had been the end of one story and the beginning of another. And this new story, while harder won and more complicated, was authentically mine. So, what do you think? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I'd love to hear your perspective on this. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in facing family betrayal. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real stories about overcoming life's toughest challenges. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this community. Remember, standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. Take care of yourselves out there. Set those boundaries and know your worth. Until next time.